I sent $10,000 to cover my sister's baby shower, then got a message. You're not invited. Just send a gift. My mom added. Honestly, you can't buy your way into this family. I just smiled, pulled my name from the trust fund, and cancelled her new SUV's lease. By morning, my phone exploded, and they showed up at my door, banging on the glass. For me, that moment hit like a freight train, and it all started with my sister Sarah's baby shower. Sarah has always been the golden child, the one my parents doted on like she hung the stars. I, on the other hand, ended up playing the role of the reliable older brother. The one who always had to have his life together so the rest of them could afford to fall apart. I was the one who bailed my brother out of debt when he got hooked on sports betting in college. I covered our parents' mortgage for 6 months when Dad's business went under. And yes, I even helped fund Sarah's lavish wedding, where she acted like a bridezilla in a tiara. So when my mom called me last month, her voice dripping with carefully rehearsed gratitude, I knew what was coming. Robert, you know Sarah's baby shower is coming up, right? She really wants it to be special. You know how much this means to her. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the pile of spreadsheets on my desk. I knew where this conversation was headed. My family had a way of turning emotional guilt into financial leverage, and I'd fallen for it too many times. But still, I said, all right, just let me know what you need. 2 days later, I wired $10,000 to cover the venue, catering, and whatever else Sarah deemed necessary to impress her yoga mom friends. I figured it would buy me a little peace, maybe a sliver of appreciation. After all, it was my sister's first baby. This was supposed to be a family moment. But then, 2 days after the transfer, I got a message from Sarah. Hey, thanks for the contribution. Just wanted to let you know we're keeping it small, so you're not invited. Just send a gift. I had to read it twice. It felt like a slap. I started typing a response, but before I could hit send, my phone buzzed again. It was my mom. To be honest, Robert, you can't buy your way into this family. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling my blood turn to ice. It was such a casual, cutting thing to say, but it hit me like a gut punch. I'd been the one propping them up for years. I'd paid for their crises, covered their mistakes, and let them walk all over me, thinking one day they'd finally see my worth. But this was the moment I realized they never would. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and took a deep breath. I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was just done. I opened my banking app, removed my name from the trust fund I'd set up for Sarah's baby, which I'd planned to start funding next month. Then, I called the dealership and canceled the lease on the shiny new SUV my mom had been driving. I had co-signed for it because her credit was shot, and she'd promised to handle the payments. Well, those promises meant nothing now. I didn't stop there. I called my lawyer to discuss selling the lake house. The one my parents loved to borrow, every summer without asking, where they'd invite their friends and trash the place like it was a beach rental. They never paid a dime for its upkeep, never even bothered to refill the propane for the grill. I'd finally had enough. I sat back and let the silence settle around me. I didn't bother texting them back. I just let it all hang in the air. The next morning, my phone exploded. Missed calls, furious texts, and increasingly desperate voicemails. Then, just as I was sipping my coffee, there was a thunderous banging on my front door. I smiled, leaned back in my chair, and took another sip. I could see my mom and sister through the glass panel beside my front door. Sarah had her arms crossed, visibly seething, while my mom's face was a mix of panic and outrage. They were pounding so hard on the glass I half wondered if they planned to break through like a couple of suburban zombies. I let them stew for a minute, finishing my coffee before casually walking over and opening the door. Robert! What the hell is going on? Sarah snapped, pushing past me into the foyer. My mom followed, her face flushed and eyes wild, like she'd just run a marathon. What do you mean? I asked, leaning against the wall, doing my best to look mildly curious. Sarah waved her phone in my face. Why did you cancel the SUV lease? I was halfway to my appointment when the engine cut off, and the screen said unauthorized use like I'm some kind of thief. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. That little feature was a perk of the high-end models, remote shutdown. Mom jumped in, her voice sharp. And why is the trust fund empty? You said you'd set up a fund for the baby, Robert. We relied on that. Ah, there it was. I could see the truth bubbling to the surface. They didn't just want me around for my presence. I was their safety net, their golden goose, and cutting them off had hit harder than they expected. I kept my tone even. You both made it clear I'm not really part of this family. You don't want me around, so I figured it made sense to stop acting like your personal bank. Sarah's face turned bright red, and she shot my mom a panicked glance. It was like watching two cornered animals silently debating which one would bite first. You're being dramatic, my mom said, folding her arms. Family helps each other. That's what we do. I let out a short laugh. Really? Because the last time I checked, family doesn't exclude you from major life events right after taking 10 grand from you. They both opened their mouths to argue, but I held up a hand. Save it. I'm done being the doormat. You said I can't buy my way into this family? Fine. I won't try. I watched the realization sink in. They had no leverage over me anymore. No secret guilt to manipulate, no favors to twist. I had taken back control, and it felt incredible. After a long, tense silence, Sarah finally spat out. Fine, if you want to act like this, maybe we don't need you at all. I just shrugged. Maybe you don't. Guess we'll find out. They stormed out, slamming the door behind them. I watched through the window as they stood on the driveway, huddled together, still arguing as they fumbled with their phones, probably trying to call my dad or my brother to figure out their next move. I turned, looked around my quiet, well-kept home, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. I had no idea just how much they would unravel without my support. But that was a show I was more than willing to watch from a distance. The fallout hit faster than I expected. By the end of the week, I started hearing from other family members, the ones who usually stayed out of the drama but were now suddenly interested in my side of the story. I got a text from my aunt, a cryptic message from my cousin, and even a voicemail from my dad, his voice strained and unsteady. Robert, call me back when you get this. I heard some concerning things from your mother. We need to talk. I ignored them all. I knew what was coming. Sarah and my mom weren't just mad, they were panicking. Without my financial support, their whole house of cards was starting to wobble. I had been their silent benefactor for years, covering the cracks in their perfect suburban facade. Without me, their lives would unravel quickly. Then, one morning, I got a call from my brother Jake. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Hey man, he said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the edge in his voice. I just heard about the SUV and the trust fund. Mom and Sarah are losing their minds. What's going on? I paused, choosing my words carefully. What's going on is I got tired of being treated like a walking ATM. They pushed me too far, so I pulled the plug. Simple as that. There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in Jake's head as he tried to figure out which side to take. He was the classic fence-sitter, always trying to stay on everyone's good side. Look, he said finally. I get it. But you know how they are. You probably just took it the wrong way. They didn't mean to cut you out, man. It's just family, you know? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Yeah, family. That's the excuse they always use, right? Family helps each other. Well, maybe it's time they learn to help themselves for once. Jake sighed, clearly realizing he wasn't going to get me to back down. Alright, but you know this is going to blow up, right? You're basically torching every bridge in this family. I smiled, glancing out the window at my calm, quiet street. Then I guess it's time for a fresh start. After I hung up, I poured myself another cup of coffee and settled into my office. I had a lot of work to catch up on, and I felt lighter than I had in years. But then, the texts started coming in again. This time, they weren't just angry rants from Sarah and my mom. My aunt accused me of abandoning the family and being ungrateful. My cousin, who I hadn't heard from in over a year, suddenly wanted to talk things out. Even my dad, who usually stayed out of these messes, tried to guilt me into meeting up. Then came the real kicker, a call from Sarah's husband, Mike. Hey, Robert. I don't want to get in the middle of this, but you need to reconsider. Sarah's a wreck, and my parents are talking about stepping in to help. This is getting messy, man. I leaned back in my chair, letting his words wash over me. It was amazing how quickly they were scrambling, like a pack of rats realizing the ship was sinking. Mike, I said calmly, maybe if they treated me like family instead of a walking wallet, we wouldn't be in this situation. I'm done being their backup plan. He sputtered a bit, caught off guard by my bluntness, before trying one last angle. Come on, man. Don't do this to your niece or nephew. Think of the baby. I almost laughed. They had taken my money, cut me out, and insulted me, and now they wanted to play the family card? Sorry, Mike, I said, my voice flat. Not my problem anymore. I hung up and blocked his number. That evening, as I sat on my back porch watching the sun dip below the trees, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my mom. You're being cruel. You'll regret this. Family always comes back together, whether you like it or not. I read it twice, felt a flicker of the old guilt they used to twist into my heart, then deleted it without responding. The storm had only just begun, and I had a feeling things were about to get a whole lot messier. A week after cutting them off, I started to see the cracks in their carefully curated lives. It didn't take long. The first real sign was Sarah's husband, Mike. Despite his "stay out of it" speech, I heard through a mutual friend that he had started picking up extra shifts at his firm. He was the kind of guy who bought into the whole Instagram family aesthetic, expensive vacations, luxury SUVs, perfectly staged family photos. But without my quiet support, it looked like his finances were starting to feel the pinch. Then there was my mom. I got a call from my dad late one night. He never called, so I knew it had to be serious. Robert, I need you to listen to me, he said, his voice shaky. Your mother is in a bad place. She's been reaching out to people, trying to fix things. She said you've been cold and distant, and I just want to know if this is really how you want things to go. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch for a moment. My dad had always been the quieter one, the steady but distant presence in our lives. He rarely got involved in the drama, but I knew my mom had probably dragged him into it, spinning some sob story about how I'd abandoned them. She crossed the line, Dad, I said finally. She told me I can't buy my way into this family. Well, I'm taking her advice. He paused, and I could almost hear him rubbing his temples, probably trying to piece together how things had gone so wrong. Look, I get it. Your mother can be difficult. But you don't have to go nuclear. This is family, son. There it was again. That same old line, like a broken record. I'm not going nuclear, Dad, I replied, my voice steady. I'm just done letting them take advantage of me. I've paid for Sarah's wedding, your mortgage, Jake's gambling debts, and more holidays than I can count. When does it stop? He had no answer for that, just a long, tired sigh. All right. I hope you know what you're doing. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of relief and regret. I wasn't trying to burn bridges, but I also wasn't about to let myself get dragged back into their emotional and financial chaos. 2 days later, I got an email from my accountant. It was a routine update, but one line caught my attention. Recent credit inquiries detected. I logged into my account and checked the details. Sure enough, both my mom and Sarah had tried to open new lines of credit using my information. I felt a flash of white-hot anger, but then it melted into something colder, sharper. I called my bank, froze my credit, and filed a report. Then, I sent a quick email to my lawyer, just to cover my bases. I expected the fallout to be swift, but I still wasn't prepared for what happened next. The very next morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I picked up anyway. Hello? Is this Robert? The voice on the other end asked, sounding like he was reading from a script. This is Officer Ramirez with the local police department. We need to speak with you regarding a potential case of identity theft. I felt my pulse spike for a moment before I realized what this was about. Sarah and my mom had pushed their luck one step too far. Of course, officer, I replied, my mind already spinning through the possibilities. I'd be happy to help. As I hung up, I felt a strange, almost euphoric calm settle over me. They had crossed the line, and now, the consequences were out of my hands. 2 days after the call from Officer Ramirez, I found myself sitting in a small, sterile conference room at the local police station. The walls were painted a dull gray, and the flickering fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The officer across from me was young, maybe mid-30s, with a neatly trimmed mustache and tired eyes that said he'd seen a lot more drama than he'd ever wanted to. All right, Mr. Roberts, he said, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. We've received multiple reports of attempted credit fraud involving your name. I just need to confirm a few details. I leaned forward, glancing down at the stack of papers. On top was a printed email, one I recognized from my own inbox, the fraud alert from my bank. They had tried to open 2 new lines of credit, both denied thanks to the freeze I'd put in place. It looks like your mother and sister attempted to use your social security number to apply for these accounts. The officer continued, flipping through the pages. Normally, this would be considered a family dispute, but given the amounts involved, it crosses into felony territory. I felt a slow, cold rage building in my chest, but I forced myself to keep my expression calm. I see, I said, my voice steady. What happens next? The officer scratched his chin, leaning back in his chair. Well, that's up to you. If you want to pursue charges, this could get serious. It might tear your family apart. I stared at the folder, my mind flashing back to years of unpaid debts, backhanded comments, and emotional manipulation. I thought about the way they had tried to guilt me after everything I had done for them, and how quickly they had turned on me the second I pulled my support. I understand, I said finally. File the charges. The officer didn't even blink. He just nodded, sliding a form across the table. All right, I'll need you to sign this statement, and then we'll handle the rest. I signed, feeling the weight of years of resentment lift off my shoulders. As I left the station, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Jake. What the hell, Robert? Mom and Sarah just called me in tears. They said you're trying to get them arrested. What's wrong with you? I didn't respond. 2 days later, my lawyer called. He had a tone in his voice I hadn't heard before, a kind of cautious approval. Robert, I've just been contacted by the police. It seems your mother and sister tried to open credit accounts in your name. I have to say, I didn't see this coming. Neither did I replied, though deep down, I realized maybe I should have. He hesitated for a moment. You know this could get messy. They might try to fight this, drag your name through the mud, even threaten a countersuit. I almost laughed. Let them. They've already burned every bridge. I'm just making it official. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, staring out at the crisp blue sky outside my office window. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely free. A week later, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from Sarah's husband, Mike, a desperate, pleading attempt to settle this quietly. He offered to cover the damages, pay back the 10 grand from the baby shower, and even threw in a promise to keep my mom away from my finances forever if I just dropped the charges. I tossed the letter in the trash without a second thought. They had made their choices. Now, it was time for them to live with the consequences. 2 days after I tossed Mike's letter in the trash, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was my dad. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but then I sighed and answered. Robert, he said, his voice a low, weary rumble. We need to talk. I know things have gotten out of hand, but this is still family. There has to be a way to fix this. I leaned back, watching the sun cut through the blinds in thin, bright slashes across my desk. I had a choice to make. I could give him the same speech I'd given Jake, the one about being tired of being their doormat, or I could just let him talk. I chose the latter, out of some lingering sense of duty, I suppose. Go ahead, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Your mother is a mess, he said, sounding more tired than angry. She's scared, Robert. She's never been in trouble like this before. I think she thought you'd never take it this far. She didn't think you'd actually press charges. I felt a flicker of something like regret, but I snuffed it out quickly. She had crossed the line, and I wasn't about to let her guilt me back into submission. She stole my identity, Dad, I said firmly. She and Sarah both. This isn't just about a few hurt feelings. They tried to open multiple lines of credit in my name. They committed a felony. There was a long pause. I could almost hear him rubbing his temples, the way he always did when he was cornered. Look, I'm not saying what they did was right, but you can't do this to your family. They're desperate. Sarah's baby is due soon, and they're scared. They don't know how to handle this without you. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of their expectations pressing down on me. It was always the same story. I was the one who had to fix everything, to clean up their messes, to make sure their lives stayed intact, even if it broke me in the process. I'm sorry, Dad, I said, my voice steady. But I'm done. They made their choices. Now they can live with the consequences. Before he could argue, I hung up. The fallout came faster than I expected. Sarah and my mom were formally charged a few days later. I heard through the family grapevine that they had both been slapped with felony fraud charges. Their once carefully curated social media lives, all brunch selfies and baby bump posts, had gone dark. I got a furious email from my aunt, accusing me of tearing this family apart and ruining Sarah's life. I didn't bother responding. Then, the real hit came. My parents' house, the one I had bailed out of foreclosure years ago, went back on the market. My mom had apparently overextended herself, counting on me to cover the gaps, and now the bank was closing in. Jake tried one last time to get me to reconsider. He showed up at my office, unannounced, looking haggard and a little desperate. "Man, you can't do this," he said, leaning over my desk, his hands gripping the edge like he might fall over. "You're ruining Mom. She's losing the house. Sarah's on the verge of a breakdown. You're destroying this family." I just looked at him, feeling a strange, icy calm. "No, Jake," I said quietly. "They destroyed this family when they decided my only value was my bank account." He stood there for a moment, his jaw working like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, slamming my office door behind him. A month later, I sold the lake house. The same one they had treated like a family retreat, always leaving a mess and never bothering to thank me for the upkeep. It sold for a nice profit, and I used the money to take a long, well-deserved vacation to the Maldives. As I sat on a sun-drenched beach, a cold drink in my hand and the ocean stretching out endlessly before me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. I was finally free of their expectations, their guilt trips, their constant need for financial support. I had cut the last threads, and I felt lighter than I had in decades. When I got back, I moved to a different city, closer to friends who actually cared about me. I blocked my family on every platform, changed my number, and closed the last remaining joint accounts. It was over. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe.